Okay, this video is for Learning Target 1 of Unit 3. We are going to be working on representing data on a scatter plot and describing how two variables are related on said scatter plot. So let's first get some vocabulary down in your video note sheets. Take a look at your video note sheets again. On the top of those notes are the focus problems, and those will be what we're working on in class. You guys will go through this video, we'll go through the note sheets and a few problems, and then we'll work from there. Okay, so vocabulary. Scatter plot, first of all. Scatter plot shows the relationship between two variables measured each on its own axis. Each point in the data set is represented by one measure from each variable. We do not connect the points when making a scatter plot because we're looking at individual points. We're not necessarily looking at things over time as we did in linear relationships before. This is not continuous data. This is individualized data points. We're also going to look at association and correlation of scatter plots. And so two variables that are linearly related are said to be positively associated when the value of one variable increases, so does the other. So on a graph, that's going to look more like this. As our one variable increases here, this variable increases as well, so that data is going to look kind of like this, where it's positively associated. Negatively associating is the opposite when one value increases, so as the value on the x-axis increases, or on this axis increases, this axis decreases. So it's going to look more like that, and we'll take a look here at some examples. If you need to pause the video and get the rest of those notes down, go ahead. So we are going to look at scatter plots with linear association and not linear association. So these would be two scatter plots that look linear in a sense that they don't actually have a line. They might not be perfect, but they have a tendency to be going up at a constant rate. Or a consistent rate, which is what we know to be linear, or down at a consistent rate. So this would be positively associated. This would be negative associated. So on your note sheets, you can go ahead and classify those. These are both linear. If you find those, this one's going to be positive. This one's going to be negative. These would be non-linear, obviously not going up at a constant rate in either of these two situations, although we are going up somewhat consistently twice. It's not throughout the graph. And we'll talk later in the year about what kind of relationship this could be. And then some scatter plots are going to be just kind of all over the place, and then those are said to have no relation. So go ahead and find those on your note sheet and classify them. Then if we have a linear relationship or association, we can talk about how linear it is. So we call that a correlation. So this would be a perfect positive linear correlation. And that R1 just means it's perfect, and we measure this on a scale of -1 to 1. But we won't really get into that. You'll get more into that in a statistics class. This would be a strong positive linear correlation, and you can see that although it's not 1, it's not perfect like this one was, it's 0.9, so it's pretty good. Okay, this would be a weak positive linear correlation. Still that positive trend there, still looks like you could fit a line to it, and we'll continue to talk about that. But this is a little weaker, and I don't think I said weak before, but this is a weak positive linear correlation. This is a perfect negative correlation. A strong negative correlation, same as the strong positive, it's almost a perfect line. And this would be a weak affiliation. You can still see, though, as one variable increases, as the dots get bigger on this side, this variable is decreasing, so that's a negative or a correlation association. And then this would be one of those scatter plots that has no correlation. You can't really choose a line to fit into them. Okay. All right, so let's look at some variables where you might make a scatter plot. So we have some couples' ages here, husbands and wives. And unlike the linear data we were looking at before, we don't necessarily have an independent and dependent variable here. A husband doesn't necessarily depend on his wife's age, or a wife doesn't necessarily depend on her husband's age. One doesn't change the other, okay? So we're just looking at some trends over these different couples, and we're going to look at the correlation of these ages. If you want to make a prediction about how you think this scatter plot will look like, if you think it's going to be positively correlated or negative correlated, go ahead and maybe that'll be a good exercise to see where this ends up. So when we're going to make a scatter plot, we need to make a high quality graph, just like you learned how to do in 7th and 6th grade. So I need a title, and I'm just going to use the title couples ages. And I need a consistent scale where I count at the same rate, and I need some labels. Okay, so the way I like to figure out how I'm going to count is I like to decide how many boxes I have in my graph and then what my range needs to be. I see we range from 33 to, I see a high of 76, so maybe I want my numbers to range from 33 to 80, and I have 15 boxes here, so maybe I want to count by threes. That'll probably get me the range that I need. Another thing about scatter plots, we don't necessarily have to start at 0, 0. So I could go ahead and start here at 30, 30 so that we can see a correlation and so that all of our data is not up in this quadrant. So if we move on here, I have a scale laid out. I'm counting by 30s, and I get up to 78, you can see. And then I have my title, couples ages, and labels there. And I'm just going to start plotting points. So I go, my first point is going to be a 36-year-old husband with a 35-year-old wife. 36, if I find that down here, and go up to 35 would be about here. That's how I'm going to plot each of my points. So 72 and 76, if I go to 72 up to 76 would be about here. And then I'm going to plot all of those points, and my scatter plot should look like this. Okay, so now we can talk about what kind of a relationship this is. I see as the husband age increases, so does the wife's age. Okay, so that means we have a positive correlation. Usually, the older husband has an older wife, middle-aged husbands have middle-aged wives, and the younger husbands have younger wives. That's probably what we expected. And then I'm going to say this is maybe a strong positive correlation. You might call that a weak correlation. It's definitely not perfect, but I can see that being a linear trend. So we'll learn more about that in the next video, what we can do with a positive correlation. So for class, either online or in a magazine or someplace, I want you to find a scatter plot. Okay, it can be on anything. It needs to have two variables. So I had husband's age and wife's age. It needs to have the variables on the side because we're going to use it in class. And you need to either print the scatter plot out on a big 8x11 sheet piece of paper, or copy it down on an 8x11 or on a piece of graph paper and bring it to class, because we're going to use it for an investigation. If you absolutely cannot find one, make one. Okay, make one up. Maybe you can find a table online at least, and make sure these are as neat as possible, because we're going to have them around the room, and we're going to be using them for an investigation in class. So that's your assignment for class, and we'll see you then.